Hi, everyone. Welcome to Live Fully podcast. My name is Felix.
My name is Alexander.
And I wanted to ask Alexander, what are the different types of Kratoms out there?
So a lot of companies will provide Kratom in different veins. Typically there are white, green, and red vein Kratom, as well as then a lot of companies or vendors will market the different regions where the Kratom was supposedly grown. So people may see like red Bali or green Malay for like Malaysian. And it seems to have reduced in the last couple years, because when Victor and I first got into Kratom, there used to be 50 or 100 different types or strains. There was like elephant leaf, where supposedly these were larger Kratom leaves that were typically harvested. There was horned leaf, where a Kratom leaf typically looks like a very stereotypical cartoon leaf, how I would draw, kind of a very basic, kind of like a shaped single petal leaf. But then a horn leaf would have these little kind of like jagged edges coming off of it.
Oh, okay.
And so the reason that there are so many names and strains or veins of Kratom is that it does have to do with some of the harvest criteria. So when people go out into the jungle or into their farm to pick Kratom, they'll look at the leaf. And so typically a white vein leaf, if you look at the bottom of the leaf, would have more of a yellowish color to it, where then a green leaf would have a very dark green vein, and then red veins would have more of a reddish color vein or even some red on the leaf itself. And the reason there's so many different veins or strains is because Kratom is used for a wide variety of perceived benefits. And so, I mean, we heard everything from, it's almost energizing to relaxing. I can use it for my pain. I can use it for depression, anxiety, all these range of benefits. And we do know that from the research, because Kratom is actually very widely researched, which is one of the great things about Kratom being unregulated, is that universities and doctors have access to it. So they can do a lot of testing, a lot of research on it. And Kratom definitely does produce a wide variety of alkaloids. And these alkaloids are what is responsible for the pharmacokinetic effects. These pharmacokinetic effects are what are associated to the pain relief benefits, to the muscle relaxant, to the anti-anxiety, to the depression, that side of it. And so we know where it comes from. But what people try to do is create names of the plant that associate to it. And as Victor and I early on started going through ordering Kratom, finding different regions to harvest it from, we actually started finding that a lot of those names were not true. So we would get shipments from harvesters in Indonesia. And at the time, we were doing a bunch of research of, let's try and order every single vein, strain, variety, region. We wanted everything, so we could start testing and figuring out, okay, which one produces the benefits we're looking for. And what we actually found was that when we'd get packages from Indonesia, we would get a bag that would have one name on it crossed off, and then on the other side, they would write the name of the product we supposedly ordered.
I see.
And so there's a lot more misinformation around strains, varieties, and veins than actual information. And so that's why at ETHA, we really have our premium blends, where every single batch we get into ETHA, we test and we quantify the active alkaloids. Metragenine, painanthine, speciogenine, speciosylitine. We don't have a full understanding of how all of those interact and work, but we have some targets that we try to indicate with and try to provide all that information as much as we can. And so what we do is when we get these varieties, strains, or veins in, we test it, and then based on those quantified test results, then we put those into categories of product that give that consistent result. And so that's where typically most most people who are familiar with kratom would say like a white vein is energizing and uplifting, and they'll say a red is relaxing and kind of eases muscle tension. And so most likely what that is that white vein has more mitragynine or mitragynine in it, and then also has some of the vasodilators in it. Kind of gives that perception of energy. Where the red vein would be a kratom that has something like painanthine in it, which is known to be a muscle relaxant. And so what we do is we target those different alkaloids and then separate our inventory based on that test result. And that's how we're able to deliver a much more consistent product than simply just relying on someone in Indonesia kind of telling us what it is named or was not named. Right. As an example, there used to be a lot of like kratom named Bali or Thai, like from Thailand. Well, up until just last year, kratom was illegal to cultivate and sell in Thailand. People could have their own tree and for own personal use in the country, but they were unable to actually cultivate it, sell it, and get it to the United States. So we know that it's not actually Thai-based kratom because it's just not coming from there. Same thing with Bali, is that Bali, there is some kratom in Bali because that's part of the indigenous region where kratom naturally grows, but not at a significant scale where people really harvest it and put it into commercial market.
Got it. Wow. Okay. And I guess that's one of the differences between ETHA and other companies that sell kratom, that you guys actually separate based on the different alkaloid characteristics, not based on red, white, and green colors.
Absolutely. Yep. That's one of our foundational aspects. And then we provide that information. We print it on each and every bag, the different percentages, at least for the mitragynine and 7-hydroxy. And then our certificates of analysis are all searchable online, so people can get the full analysis and get that information that allows them to manage their health and wellness.
I see. And how many kratom products does ETHA sell?
We have a full premium line, so we have 7 or 8 premium products, and that really kind of spans from a traditional name like Meng Da or Workout, which is that typically used. I'll use that like on for energy, for kind of discomfort relief. And then we have our sunrise, midday, sunset, nightfall, and that really kind of progresses down the alkaloid profile more towards those muscle relaxant alkaloids, as well as kind of the more anxiety relief. So it kind of spans that whole entire range of kind of the morning uplift in mood and energy, all the way down to kind of keeping me focused and kind of a little more boost in the middle of the day when I kind of feel that like midday, like little trough, and then kind of towards the night when I relax and then go to bed.
Oh, okay. And how is kratom different from CBD?
CBD is one of the major cannabinoids in cannabis or hemp, which are the identical plant. There's no difference between hemp, marijuana, or cannabis. They're all the same. And cannabis produces cannabinoids, which have been around for a long time, very much consumed by humans for millennia. But because of the regulatory status, where marijuana was created as a Schedule I substance, that has very much limited the research on it. And so we know that humans have an endocannabinoid system. So we have specific cell receptors for these types of products, which, cannabinoids are also produced by other plants. It's not only unique. There are some unique ones to cannabis, but there are, I believe, cannabinoids that are produced by other plants. I think there's some moss and algae and other systems that produce it. And so kratom is a plant that's related to coffee, and it actually produces a class of compounds of alkaloids that are also called mitragynines or mitragynines. Some of these are partial opioid receptor agonists. They interact with our mu and delta receptors, as well as they can interact with serotonin and also the alpha adrenergic receptor. And so this is the important part about kratom, is that it's a partial agonist to these receptors, which means there's kind of like a dose-dependent effect where the more kratom I consume, the more and more pain relief I get, but then it kind of hits a plateau where it does not keep increasing. And then same thing, because of that alpha adrenergic receptor, when that is activated, there is less or no dopamine released. And so this is different from other compounds, including some of the ones in cannabis that can release dopamine. So we kind of get this pleasure-seeking ability, where kratom, since it doesn't do that, we don't see the history of use of kratom going from, say, a consumption of the leaves in a tea to then increasing into different consumption routes. So we do see that with cannabis, where people kind of grow cannabis and they keep growing it to produce a higher concentration of those cannabinoids. And then also the route of administration. So how people use cannabis. It used to be more of a food product. People ate a lot of it. But now we see it kind of going into smokables. We see it going into purified vape forms. People want more and more purified, faster hitting versions of it. And that is typically due to that dopamine response, where you release dopamine, you want more of it, and it kind of keeps increasing. Kratom, we don't see that history of use. And that's because if you use more of it, it actually blocks some of the dopamine from being released. And that's why it's such a, I think, well-rounded product, at least for myself, where if I use kratom a lot, sometimes every day, sometimes multiple times a day, if my back pain is really bad. And then there's other times where I don't use kratom at all, and I almost don't notice that I'm not using it.
Great. Well, that's a lot of information to absorb there, Alexander. So that's the end of this episode. Thanks for joining in, and remember, live fully. Bye now.